Welcome back to Represent NYC. Again, I'm Victoria Bert. I'm the producer of this show, and we're going to talk a little bit now about workers' rights. And joining me now is Laurie Morrison, who's the owner of her own law firm, Laurie Morrison. She represents workers and she fights for them. And I want to talk to her a little bit about rights in the era of a pandemic. Hi, Laurie. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Hope you're all staying well.
Yes, we're doing the best we can. I think that's what everybody's doing. And I want to just ask you about what protections, first and foremost, what protections are in place for an employee right now?
Okay. In terms of employment rights, we already have and can take advantage of the anti-discrimination, anti-retaliation laws, right? So these protections have already been there for us. Our ancestors fought and died in the civil rights era, right, to give us these protections. So again, employers cannot discriminate against you based on disability, based on race, based on sex, gender, sexual orientation, religion. Those same provisions and protections are there. Why do they assist us with COVID? Well, we're having a lot of people who are having severe psychological distress, which can now fall under disabilities, depending on how severe those are. They should be protected. We also have people becoming sick, right? So as far as the sickness can come under perhaps the city laws, then they should be protected as well. So we already have some of those protections, and I can get deeper into whether you can be reasonably accommodated and what have you under those laws at a later time. But we also have we have OSHA, we have also Family First Act, we've got some amended New York City, New York State amended laws because of COVID, and I'm sure we have those in Jersey as well, comparable. So I highly, highly recommend that if someone's wanting details and knowledge about the kind of protections they have, reach out to an employment lawyer like myself. Happy and available to assist, to answer any questions that you have. On your own, you can go online and check out the Department of Labor, check out OSHA's websites, check out the Attorney General websites. So there are protections there. Do we need more? Absolutely. But we can take advantage of protections that are already in place right now.
As an employee, is it my right not to be put in harm's way? Or in the middle of a pandemic, be not social distancing?
I wish I could say yes, and in my soul, and it should be yes, morally, ethically, right? But the laws are very unclear with that. If someone's an essential worker, for instance, they're getting sick, they're having psychological illnesses, they're having physical illnesses, they're still being forced back to work because there's something called reasonable accommodation. And in a pandemic, people who are considered our essential workers, their needs to be protected are taking second place to the needs of the public health and safety, okay? But within that, they should also have protections. For instance, there are essential workers who have and can work from home. So if the employer still tries to force them back to work when there's no need, because the work can still be done effectively from home, then they should be protected. Then the law says, as far as we've seen it, again, this is all new because we're in a pandemic, so the courts haven't had a chance to rule on this yet. But with respect to what's happened when we have important workers who can be reasonably accommodated, but they're not, the law should say that they can be accommodated by staying home.
Is there a legal umbrella, essential, non-essential, or is that completely subjective?
It's not completely subjective. On the other hand, there's no bright line rule. So we have these different criteria. People who are there working for the directly public health and safety welfare, those people are considered essential workers, right? Even if you're an essential worker, if you have and can work from home and do your job effectively, then that should be considered a reasonable accommodation. Now, if you're a non-essential worker, now you have greater protections, right? Because if you're a non-essential worker, many states, including New York and New Jersey, have stay-at-home orders. So you're not supposed to be going to work in person. And if you can't work from home and the employer is not supposed to be open anyway for business, well, then you have even a greater protection.
Talk to me about how paid sick leave and how paid family leave work in this during this outbreak.
Yes, those are very statutory based, right? So it's very how long you've been working for an employer or what have you. But bright line rule is that we've got now the federal law, which is the Families First law. You can be protected under that. You also have the amended New York City and New York State laws that also provide protections. Also, it's important to note that under your own employer's short-term and long-term disability provisions, you might be protected and you might have some ability to have some accommodation under those as well.
It's a two-part question. What if a worker gets sick from COVID? What kind of protections do they have if they actually get ill and they're out for weeks?
Okay.
And the other part of that question is, what if somebody in their workspace gets sick? What kind of protections do they have from getting in close quarters with them?
So going to your first issue, someone has COVID and their leave runs out. Okay. Well, the employer might already have additional short-term and long-term disability leave. So I would highly recommend that they go to that. There's also the Family First, right? So they can still they might still be able to take advantage of those laws that are currently in place. But if they have to go back to work, then it would be suggested that they have certain accommodations like being able to work part-time from home, right? Limiting their exposure to others, right? For instance, not necessarily transferring out of your job to another job because people want to keep their jobs, right? But maybe moving to a different area of the office. So this should be a fluid discussion. That's what the interactive process is all about with respect to disability laws. The employer is required to work with the employee to try to figure out an accommodation that can keep the employee safe, keep others safe, and keep them working. Now, with respect to your second question, people who are fearful of others who might have who have COVID or who had COVID, because again, it's been shown that COVID can last in someone's body for several weeks, if not months. So people have a reasonable fear of that. Okay. Now, does that phobia and or fear rise to the level of being disabling under the laws? If someone has an anxiety about going to work with someone who has COVID, and that anxiety interferes or negatively affects their daily life activities, well, now they're disabled. Okay. So now the employer needs to make an accommodation, while at the same time accommodating the other person, right? We don't want to turn our fears into discriminating against others.
What if somebody feels they're being discriminated against because they have COVID-19 or had COVID-19?
Right. Well, it's the same as with any type of discrimination, be it race, disability, sexual orientation, color, creed, right? They have protections, okay? First, they have to be rendered disabled, okay, under COVID. And the employer and coworkers cannot ostracize them and harass and discriminate against them based on their disability. Okay, so the same thing applies. Okay, so for instance, we're having Asian people, right, who were being abused in the streets. Okay, that's ethnicity discrimination. But we're also having so many Black and brown people being told to go back to work prematurely. And their non-people of color counterparts are not being forced to do that. We're having workers who were not appreciated before, people who were basically barely working minimum wage, are now being called essential. And it's now being shown through COVID how important this workforce is, but they're not being protected. And even through COVID, they're being subordinated, and that's not okay either.
Okay, so other than reaching out to an attorney, which is obviously the number one answer, right? Reach out to an attorney if your rights are violated. Is there any other thing that someone can do?
Well, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up. You have a right to protect yourself. You don't necessarily need an attorney, okay? Attorney's a resource just like the internet's a resource, okay? Just like the courts have resources in the pro se departments. So go online, check out court websites, check out the AG's office. There's lots of research that you can do without an attorney. Okay. And it's important to recognize that people can pursue their own claims even without attorneys. It's called pro se. It happens all the time. You have that right. Okay. And unfortunately, I'm getting calls for some people who thought that they did have legal protection, but for some reason it's not working or what have you. They're professional, they're not agreeing. You have a right to move on, find other ways of being protected. Okay, so yes, we have a lot of protections beyond just calling attorneys.
But they can't always call you.
Of course, they can always call me. But no, but either way, even my clients will tell you, I work for them. Yeah, I've got the law degree. Yeah, I've been doing this almost 20 years, but I work for my clients. They come first, right? What does that mean? That means I educate every single one of my clients. I want them to know as much about their legal rights as I do so that they can make educated decisions and well-informed decisions. So in the end, I can guide them. But there's nothing better than knowing your rights for yourself and having professional behind you to help you make those decisions. Very, very important to know your
Laurie,
rights.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
You.
Appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Stay safe.
You too.